to May 2021. May 2021. The restrictions were, they were on, and then they're off, and then they're partially on, then they're off again, then they're on again. And then the premier said, we're open for summer. Then he said, we're open for good. And that was all a big sham, a big lie. But throughout that whole time, they pulled my food handling permit. They took my liquor license. They did all sorts of things. They got injunctions against me. They charged me 22 times. Eventually, they chained the doors of my business shut. So I just started serving burgers and pancakes in the park next to my patio. Nothing was going to stop me. And then I announced that I was going to hold a big rally against what they were doing. And we had a lot of people coming. We ended up with about probably 1,500 to 2,000 people a day for that protest.
And we're talking about your restaurant is in a small community at Mirror, Alberta,
yeah,
right?
500 people.
Yeah. 500 people. Okay.
Yeah. Which is interesting. I've actually been alleged to be responsible for all of the crime that ever happens here since I opened my restaurant, because we brought people to town, which is a ridiculous notion. But anyway, so they tried to throw the book at me. And throughout that time, I tried very hard to actually find out what my rights were, because I didn't really know it at the time. I mean, we were just told we live in a free country, you're free. And that's the end of the story. But it's a lot more intricate and complex than that. The facts are that the government doesn't give us our rights and our freedoms. Those are given to us by God, and even the Constitution and the Charter of Rights, they acknowledge that under the supremacy of God and rule of law. That's how our charter reads. So basically, the government says, well, if we can prove that it's justifiable for the greater good of society, we can take away your rights at any time, even though they didn't give us those rights in the first place. So this was the battle. And I'm still fighting that battle to this day. But throughout all of that, the support just grew. It grew and grew and grew. And if you use a Facebook following as a metric for the amount of support that you have, and yes, to be fair, it's not all people who like what I'm doing. Some people just are hoping for a train wreck, which is interesting to watch too. But if you use that as a metric, before this happened, we had about a following of about 5,000-6,000 people, which is amazing for such a small place. And actually, there's another little backstory. The year before, when we were going through the lockdowns, I actually opened up a drive-in movie theater at my restaurant so we could be compliant with the mandates and the rules and stuff, and still get people out with their families, out of the house, enjoying a night out, having some sense of normalcy, and helping out with this quickly spiraling mental health situation we're experiencing in the province. So anyway, before the drive-in movie theater, we had about 1,000 people, I think, following our page. And the support we got when we pushed back against that, because AHS tried to shut us down for that too, it was phenomenal. So our page grew and it grew and it grew. And to this day, we have 120,936 people following our Facebook page, which is a huge audience. And that tells me, if Facebook and social media is any kind of metric as to the pulse of average Canadians and Albertans, that people know there's something wrong. They can feel it. They just maybe can't articulate that in words yet. So I've kind of made it my mission in life to articulate that as best I can and try and help others know that they're not alone in feeling something is wrong, and that, yes, there is a clear path we can take in order to prevent this type of thing from happening in the future.
Is this the first time that you've actually, quote, been in the spotlight in your life? Like, is this, or have you kind of been a person that has got involved in activities and politics?
Not at
and
all.
Stuff like that? Not at all.
No, I kept to myself. We just did our own thing. Politics for me was checking a box at election time and hoping that there was a good leader or somebody else that was going to carry the torch on behalf of me for my rights and freedoms. And I just lived my life as a passenger on the roller coaster of politics.
Okay. So then the truckers convoy came along.
Well, throughout this kind of journey we've been on, there's been all sorts of people approach me with all sorts of different ideas and plans on how we can motivate people to stand up for themselves. And some things have kind of been successful, others not so much. Some have been like borderline complete lunacy. And I've distanced myself from that kind of thing because if I'm going to put my time and effort into something, I want it to be legitimate and I want it to make an impact. So I started hearing rumblings of this trucker convoy that was going to happen. I saw Chris Barber and Bridget's TikTok videos talking about how this is ridiculous. You know, why can I go sit in a lounge and have a beer, but my friend can't because they choose not to get a jab that's not being effective like they said it was going to be. And there seemed to be some issues with it. So they stood up, even though it didn't really affect them. They were, I think both of them, or at least Chris was fully jabbed and he could do whatever he wanted work wise. But he stood up on behalf of other people that couldn't. And so I was really proud of him for that. I thought this guy deserves some kudos for doing that. His following grew, and then some other groups kind of attached onto this and this idea. And what happened next was millions of Canadians who had felt like something was wrong, but they couldn't put their finger on it. Or maybe they thought they were alone or isolated in their belief that their friends and neighbors shouldn't be treated the way they were being treated. They all of a sudden started to get an idea of how many people were like them. Then they started standing up. And what we saw was arguably the most monumental thing that Canada has seen, at least in my lifetime. And that was millions of Canadians standing up for each other against tyrannical government policies and rules. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't going to get involved in the convoy at all because there were some groups participating, and I kind of thought, you know what, these guys are a little bit nutty. I don't speak out against them, but I don't support them or share the stuff because I want to do real things. But then I saw what was happening. I saw that this was the catalyst that Canada needed to get people off their butts and involved in this and use their voices. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to do this. And Friday at 3:30, I decided I was going to go on the convoy. By 5 o'clock, a friend of mine had sold me his picker truck for $1 so I could go to Ontario. Saturday, my insurance guy, he worked over the weekend and got my policy set up. Sunday, a shop opened up on the day off, brought the truck in into the CVIP. Monday morning, I had my probation meeting at 10 a.m., and then I hit the road on my way to Ottawa. And I mean, the rest is history. What we saw, thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people lining the highways and overpasses in the bitter cold, cheering for truckers, little children with signs that said, "Thank you for fighting for my freedoms. We love you, truckers." Thousands of signs like that. It was something that any leader of any country should have been proud of. Because that showed right there that yes, Canada does have an identity, and it has nothing to do with a guy with nice hair wearing fancy socks that sits in Parliament. Nothing to do with government, nothing to do with authoritarian leaders, anything like that. It's about people standing up for each other when they need them, and that's what happened. So it's a real shame that our Prime Minister didn't see that and see it for what it was and encourage Canadians to embrace this identity of caring that we have. Instead, he slandered it, he lied about it, he created a lot of hate and division, and he, in my opinion, he failed miserably as any kind of a leader. That was a golden opportunity, and it was missed.
Don't you think the reason why he missed it is he was on his own agenda? I mean, obviously that seems to be clear with the World Economic Forum.
Well, how do you reconcile a country who knows they can depend on each other and they'll stand up for each other in their time of need with a government mandate that requires individual Canadians to be dependent on government? I mean, that just doesn't jive, right? That's not part of the reset plan, which is not a conspiracy. This is a fact. This is
Yeah.
in black and white. You can read the stuff yourself. If I'm actually I don't know if I'm a member. I guess I'm a subscriber to the World Economic Forum email list, and every week I get emails from them. And there's this wheel in there that looks like an eye. It's very ominous, but in that eye there's links you can click, and it tells you exactly what these great resetters want to do to you, right from a digital ID and a digital currency, to exploiting pandemics, to further the reset. Like, all of this stuff is on there. The information's been on the United Nations website for, I think, 15 or 20 years in black and white. They are telling you that they want you to own nothing and be happy. Government owns business, government owns property, government decides where you live, they decide what you eat, they decide where you work, everything for the greater good, for the survival of mankind. It's not a conspiracy, it's right there. And now you consider, recently the NDP and the Liberals have formed this coalition to maintain power through 2025, and they will. They will absolutely maintain power. You look at the NDP manifesto, and it appears as though they took Karl Marx's manifesto and they branded it with the NDP logo. And if anyone out there who's watching this doesn't believe me, get your hands on a copy of the NDP manifesto. It literally says government will own business, government will own property. It follows the reset plan to a T. It's completely reliant on Canadians being 100% dependent on government to protect them and to take care of them, not to ensure that they have the opportunities to prosper on their own, but literally to make sure that everybody's outcome in life is equal. And it is downright scary.
Yeah, they're only going to protect those that will agree with them, and those that don't agree with them, they hate you and want to get rid of you.
Well, they do want to get rid of us. The people who have, they can't possibly get any more money. I mean, they could, but they don't care because money means nothing to them. They have so much. They have tons of power. The only thing left for them is survival. And that group, they have quite literally said that we who aren't part of that group are nothing but useless eaters. And that United Nations plan calls to reduce the world's population to 1.5 billion people. Now, what do we do with the rest of the 6 billion people? How do we deal with them? But it's right there in black and white. This is not a conspiracy. I don't subscribe to conspiracy theory. I am careful to try not to repeat anything that cannot be verified by using the information that's readily available on the internet. And that's, yeah, you're right. They don't care about us. We are a virus that needs to be eradicated from the planet, from the planet, because if we don't get rid of everybody, this impending disaster called climate change will light the world on fire and destroy mankind. That's, at the end of the day, that's what they are trying to prevent.
So now you went from the truckers and you were down there and we interviewed you while you were there in Ottawa and everything else. Now you're going around the circuit, back and forth across this province with the Alberta Prosperity Project. You want to share about that?
Yeah, so the reason why I'm supportive of this is there is no way that any man, woman, or child in Canada is going to escape the reset that this Liberal NDP coalition government have in store for them. It's not going to happen. Our provincial government here, the UCP, has no intention of fighting back against that, nor could they, according to the way the Constitution's written. The NDP certainly aren't going to help us. They want to accelerate this. So we're left with one option, and that is standing on our own. And it was a tough pill to swallow for me when I realized that, even though I saw Canada uniting the way they did against a common goal, or a common foe, which was the federal vaccine mandates, there comes a time when, in this case, A province needs to stand up and be a leader. A province needs to lead by example and say, no, we're not going down this path. The Articles of Confederation are very clear in the fact that any province that joined Confederation is free to leave. And it's time that we have that conversation. The only way we're going to be a free and prosperous people going forward is if we exercise that independence. So I speak on behalf of the APP frequently, trying to motivate people to get involved and engaged in politics, do their homework, read what's available online, find out which parties or which groups support independence and which ones actually have a plan to get us through or around this impending reset that the federal government has in store for us. The APP, Alberta Prosperity Project, it's an educational group. They're not a political party. They merely want to educate Albertans as to the necessity and the merits of Alberta independence.
And what kind of support are you having in the meetings that you're going to?
It's huge. Almost every place we go to, it's certainly the ones that I've spoke at, are either at capacity or over. People are hungry for this. They're hungry for a change. They feel like something's wrong. They want answers. They want something to give them hope. And at this point, I'm just trying to tell people that the thing that should give them the most hope is their own voices and the power of their own voices. Because when they use them, as we saw in Ottawa, the government is forced to bend a knee and act as the servants that they are to us instead of acting as our masters. All the literature they have, including the policy and governance documents, the bylaws that were written that any political party could adopt to ensure accountable, responsible government and small government, that's there. The rationale for independence is there. There's a ton of frequently asked questions. And I mean, there's probably people watching this right now that are saying, well, we're going to be landlocked. Well, what about tidewater access? What are we going to do for a currency? What about a military? Those questions are all answered. And I haven't seen one answer yet that didn't give me more hope than I had before. So, yeah, I would definitely encourage you to check it out and read what's there for yourself.
I just want to know quickly your legal situation. What's happening there? Any update on? Are you good? Are you free and clear? Can you share anything?
Yeah, I mean, I still have to appear on 22 charges of contravening the Public Health Act, which, by the way, if I ever have a voice in the legislature, that document will go through a very, very serious and rigorous review, as will all legislation, provincial legislation, to ensure that it does not violate either the Alberta Bill of Rights, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, or whatever Charter of Rights and Freedoms that an independent nation of Alberta has. I don't believe that we should even have legislation that looks like that. Legislation that specifically states that the Chief Medical Officer of Health, the Minister of Health, or anyone acting on their behalf in order to carry out their duties in good faith, they can do anything they want in a public or a private setting. They can tell you how many people you can have in your house. They can tell you you have to close your restaurant. Yeah. They can tell you how many people you can have in your bedroom, which is none of anybody's business.
Yeah.
They can literally take your home and use it as a vaccination clinic if they want. That's how the legislation reads. It also goes on to read as such that you can't sue them. If they were wrong and they did this to you, you can't sue them. They can't be held liable. They're protected.
Of course.
Their position is privileged. And if you do as I did and speak out against them and act out against them, you will be charged and punished before you ever get a chance to be heard in court. They can phone the police will come arrest you. You tell the police, my rights have been infringed. They say, I don't care. You're going to hash that out in court in the next 10 years. That's how that works. And that's how most of our provincial legislation reads. Yeah. So I still have those 22 charges. We recently ran into a little bit of a hurdle with our funding for our lawsuit, for our claim against Alberta Health Services, the provincial government, Chief Medical Officer of Health and her office, the CEO of AHS, all those people. But we've got it sorted out now, so we will be suing them still. I also have, what else is going on legally wise? I have another year of probation, another 25,000 or something in fines, 27,000 in fines to pay, a bunch of community service I'm supposed to do, all because I acted against the government.
Yeah.
And they haven't proved any harm that I've done to anybody.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, my inbox is flooded. My email gets flooded. My phone never stops ringing with people telling me that, or thanking me for what I did because it gave them hope again. There's people that have, when Carrie and I and Jessica were on our way back from Ottawa, people were running up to us in truck stops, people who didn't even know we were going to be there, with tears streaming down their face, thanking us for saving their lives because we gave them something to hope for.
Yeah.
And even though the community at large and society at large feels that way because they knew something was wrong, they thought they were alone, and they lost hope, and folks like us and many, many others gave them something to hope for. Even though we did that, the government still throws us in jail, keeps us in court, fines us, tells us we can't speak, all of these things. And none of that stuff can be fixed in any reasonable amount of time. I was supposed to appear for my charges last April. That kept getting kicked down the can. I was supposed to be back in court last November. My lawyer went one day and they adjourned it. And then it was supposed to be January and February. Then it was supposed to be April. Now it's supposed to be June. And they're going to keep kicking it down the curb. It's insane.
Wow, so great to hear from Chris. What an incredible guest. And I mean, he is going through it. He's the real deal, Alan. He's the real deal.
I know. And I'm just so grateful that he's willing to come on the show and to help us understand more. And it's an encouragement to just listen to him. Really is.
If you're hungry, stop at the Whistle Stop Cafe. Grab yourself, would you say, Alan, Eggs Benedict? I want to do the hot eggs Benedict.
Well, his Eggs Benedict, he says, is world famous.
All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. If you want to find out more about us, you can go online at www.talktruth.ca. That's www.talktruth.ca. And you can reach out to us on email. We're on air at talktruth.ca. Thank you for watching. We'll see you guys next week.
Love you guys.